Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Masks of Masculinity. I have today with me another one of your Detoxifying Masculinity members, Lancelot Brown. Say hi to the nice people, Lancelot, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Lancelot Brown. Lancelot Brown Jr. to be specific, because that's important, and we're going to get into that later. The main thing with me is that currently I work in mental health. I do community social work. I am a non-degree community social worker, aka a therapeutic care provider. I mostly work with young men, helping them work on things such as coping skills, life skills, interpersonal interactions, family interactions, and things of the sort. I have been a chef's apprentice, courier, orthotic fitter, mental health aide. I've done a bunch of jobs, and throughout them, I've always kind of had a goal to help people or create situations wherein I'm doing, as it were, seen good work. So that's kind of my life's goal. I joined the Detoxifying Masculinity group to look at myself, but also to try to help others with what little knowledge I feel I possess in terms of how to be a better, as it was called, man, or masculine presenting individual. Yeah.
Awesome. Before we continue with the interview, just a quick technical note for you guys listening out there, and ladies. We love our lady listeners if we have any. Lancelot has an upstairs neighbor. I have an upstairs neighbor. It's New York. There's some noise going on in my apartment today, definitely. Maybe some from his. We apologize. Moving on. Lancelot, one of the aspects of the Detoxifying Masculinity Men's Group is the sort of emotional labor, as Jack likes to say, that we do for each other. Mental health is I think of as a very technical profession. You're thinking about how the brain is actually working. But when we think about emotions, we tend to think about, the heart and all these very esoteric terms for emotionality. How do you help people in your daily life, your practice, wherever, sort of come to terms with their potentially toxic emotions and masculinity?
Well, the first step that I always have to get through is getting people to understand that there's nothing shameful or wrong or bothersome about accepting the help. To either give help, receive help, to be kind, there's nothing inherently unmasculine about it. Unfortunately, I do work with a lot of youth who have ingrained in them lessons of... All of my youth have either been in or are currently in foster care. Many of them have learned life lessons that are based around the concept of survival, some of them by any means necessary. And it's getting them to understand, okay, you can be kind and still survive. In fact, it will enhance that survivability, and showing them that when they're dealing with their toxic emotions, many of them first need to realize that it's toxic. It's building empathy. It's building connection. It's showing them that it's okay to have these emotions. The thing that matters is how you express them. It's how you interact with others. It's not taking it out on other people. And there have been times where I've told some of the kids I work with, look, if you want to scream at somebody, fine. You wait till our session, you can scream at me all you want, because at the end of the day, I'm going to go home and I'm going to just wash it off, and we can still talk about it. But don't scream at your mother, your aunt, because a lot of them have just the one figure in their homes. A lot of them are coming from single family homes, and it's usually their mom who's around, or they don't feel that they have that connection with their fathers or male figures in their life to form that connection. I've been told by a lot of my youth, you're the closest thing I have to a dad, and that's why I scream at you like this. That's why I treat you like this. That's why I need you to be that person for me. And much fewer of the youth have told me, and I'm ashamed of it. It's unfortunately something that I see a lot, and it's helping them get past that initially. It creates a block in our society to tell any man, regardless of age, that, oh, man up. Oh, that's how you feel. Why are you talking about this? Oh, you know what? That's just what men do when they're toxic, when they're unhealthy, or even when they're just unsure of how to proceed, and you don't give them that permission to explore that space in a healthy way. So, yeah, that's my main thing with dealing with toxic emotion. I hope that answered the question. I do tend to go on a bit when it comes to this sort of thing.
No, I personally love it, actually. It makes my job easier. And gives me more to ask. And so I didn't know that you mainly worked with kids. When coming to the Detoxifying Masculinity group, do you find that some of our stories have the same resonance as what the kids are telling you, and that these problems, trying to think of how to phrase the question I want to ask,
manifest regardless of age?
Exactly. Thank you.
Yes, honestly, it's something wherein if you don't learn how to deal with it when you're a kid, and you don't challenge yourself to learn how to deal with it as an adult, or worse yet, society enables that behavior or encourages it, you don't have to change. You don't change if you're comfortable. Comfort is the enemy of change. It's something where you tell yourself, you know what, this has worked for me. I don't really need to get better, move forward. So I've explained to my boys sometimes the discomfort of the reality of the discomfort of the situation. Okay, you think that by talking to someone this way, it makes you seem powerful, it makes you seem strong, it makes you seem... The reality of it is they're scared, they're upset, they're afraid, and in how you treat them, it will come back to you at some point in time. It's either going to damage the relationship, or it's going to be something wherein one day you're going to look back on it and it's going to create a block between you and that person. A lot of the men that I see in our group that I talk to sometimes, I do notice that basically an ability to move past certain things. There are members who, and I always try to be calm and polite about it, but there are other times where I'm just like, look, I'm just going to be direct with you. In my opinion, this is the problem. This is the solution you're attempting. That solution will not work. For an example, do you mind me giving examples?
I'm hesitant only because what is said within the Detoxifying Masculinity group is supposed to remain within it. I would say if you can do it with anonymity, then...
Yeah, definitely. The interaction that I see between a lot of my youth and typically members of the opposite sex, but sometimes members of the same sex, when it comes to attraction and interaction, I've seen manifest in older men, not even just members of the group. It's that mindset of, they are fundamentally different and I need to treat them as such, and I need to frame it in a certain way, which is something that I always try to redirect. The other day, a boy told me, "Oh, Mr. Lancelot, I have a girlfriend." I said to him, "Okay, what does that mean?" And he goes, What do you mean, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, she's my girlfriend. Okay, what does that mean? Well, she's mine. As in your property? Or no, I'm not saying it that way. I'm not saying it that way. Okay, then what does that mean? She's gonna only date me. Okay, what does dating mean? This boy is young. He is under the age of 10. So for me, it's something good to just kind of work through these things with people, but then I'll ask grown men the same thing, and they don't. Oh, well, that's my girl. Well, what does that mean? Well, she's my girl. And okay, you've expressed a possessive statement. You've used a possessive pronoun in reference to another human being. What does that entail? Well, she's mine. I'm like, you keep saying she's yours, but you're not saying that you're hers. And unfortunately, some people will tell me, well, that's kind of strong, and I'm not sure. And so that's...
It reminds me, I don't know how big a musical theater person you are, but it reminds me of The King and I, where the king is telling her that he's like a bee and the women are his flowers, and The bee can go from flower to flower to flower, but flower must never go from bee to bee to bee.
Yeah, basically. And that's another thing that's pushed by society. And I'm like, well, why do you think that way? It's something that I see ingrained in really young boys. And that if nobody challenges them that, they're going to grow up to be men who think that same thing.
And you're just trying to invoke some critical thinking there of why these systems are in place. And then hopefully they will be able to come to this point within themselves that they can say, well, why are these systems in place? Why am I playing into the system? Oh, wait, maybe the system needs to change.
Yeah.
It's essentially what you're trying to guide them to. Not push them to, but just sort of put the signpost, go here, not here.
In my profession and in my personal life, I don't like to put pressure on people. I don't like to try to sway them to a side. It's often easier to just lay something out and let somebody do it themselves. You know, it's kind of like, so I'm a fan of Lego bricks. I have a huge collection. I'm laying out the pieces.
Oh, yeah.
I'm giving you a picture, and I'm stepping back. If you choose to assemble it, that's your belief. If you ask me for help, I can help guide you through it, but I'm not going to do it for you. I'm not going to put it together for you, because that doesn't help you, because then you don't know how it's built. The main point is that when someone is young, it's a lot easier to get them into it and to understand than when they're older and they're like, well, what is this? This isn't something I need to learn because I've never needed to learn this my whole life. Which is funny, because that's often the response I get from grown men when I tell them that I collect Lego bricks. Oh, that's for kids. I'm like, it's something I enjoy.
Or even, for example, with going back to school, many people think that that's something you do when you're younger. And I grew up knowing that I wanted to keep learning forever because I just love learning so much. And sometimes people just don't see the value in going after something that's like, oh, that's not part of your career path, or, you know, that's not something you're going to ever really use. Why are you learning this thing? It's like it sort of adds to your, even if it is something so esoteric, say for example, like Latin is a dead language. We don't really use it. They say, but for example, it's a great way to have an underlying understanding of modern Western languages.
Or even just to sit down in certain movies and be like, oh, they're saying weird stuff to summon that demon.
And then you just find out they're saying toilet water, rosebud, I love you. And that's how they summon. It's like, oh, well, all the magic's gone now. Okay.
It sounded cool before I knew this. For me, it's a similar thing, except for my thing is typically hands-on learning. I fell off somewhat of it. Working in my profession is actually a great excuse to learn certain things, and I love when my children, because I work with a young girl now too, come to me and they're like, hey, how does this work? And I'm like, I don't know, we're going to find out together. And people don't seem to realize that a big part of life is not only having your own interest and excitement, is being able to do that and be that for other people. My version of masculinity is always trying to be nurturing. So, for example, one of my partners said to me the other day, she was like, it amazes me that I will like something and you will learn more about it even if it's not your thing. She loves bridges and infrastructure and things like that. And I'll be like, yeah, sure. Let's go see a bridge. Let's go. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, no, let's go. I learned that the other day, the bridge to, do you know Roosevelt Island? It's in the middle of the East River. Yeah, the bridge that is called the Welfare Island Bridge. I didn't know that.
Oh.
It's a giant bronze plaque. If I'd have never gone with her, I would have never known this.
So is it Welfare Island? Because I know Roosevelt Island was supposed to be a planned community. I think at one point Le Corbusier was involved in production. I don't know if he stayed with it throughout. Was it meant to be a place essentially to put people on welfare?
It's something wherein I haven't gotten to look into it as much as I wanted to. Apparently, it is a planned community. It's something that was developed that way, but it was supposed to be more accessible. And I haven't been able to find anything so far. Mind you, very scant looking into this. I would love if one of your listeners would make it easier for me and be like, hey, what's up? This is the information. To say that it was something to be more accessible, something to be more for the people, but it was also supposed to be like the modern future of New York City. Because, for example, they've got the pneumatic tube system beneath it for the garbage.
Mm-hmm.
There's no like large trucks that are allowed in it. It's very planned out. It's very community based.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even make U-turns there. Which I learned when I was a courier. We were doing deliveries for this inventor, and we tried to turn around, and the guy was like, no, you can't do that here. That's not allowed. And I was like, but we have a street, and it's wide enough. And he's like, no, that's not allowed here. And I'm like, on the whole island? Like, no,
well, for listeners who are not from New York, Roosevelt Island is a pretty tiny island, but by comparison.
It is a very tiny island, yes, but it's not so tiny that making a U-turn should be something that's so expressly forbidden. But these are the things that I learned just through other people. I saw a great quote that was like, I'm built of the things that other people loved, and I've just been leaning into that lately. Like, for example, my grandma is getting more into yarn and knitting. I don't want her to teach me it because she yells at me sometimes when it comes to that kind of thing. But it's lovely just sitting down and watching her and taking it in.
To segue a little bit, still keeping in the same direction though, I did ask you to think, as I ask all of my listeners to think about, what does masculinity mean for Lancelot?
Masculinity for me is a matter of using your masculinity in that, your strength, your ability, typically physical, typically something of also privilege, to do good, to nurture, to be kind. It's the concept of nutric masculinity that I lean into, to give to others using what you have inherently. To me, that's what masculinity is. It's something where, hey, you know what? You need me to lift this like 80-pound thing and carry it across the street for you because you can't do it? Yeah, sure. I got time. Yeah, I'll do it. And if I can't, I'll try to find a way to make it happen at some point in time in the future. It's connecting with youth and modeling positive masculine behaviors for them. And that could present as any number of things. It's giving them the freedom to define their masculinity for themselves by showing them, hey, you know what, buddy, if you want to paint nails, we'll paint nails. Oh, well, that's a girly thing. All right, first off, nail painting is awesome. It's for everybody. Second off, all right, what's your concern? Oh, well, I think people will think this. All right, cool. Let's find some colors that you like that would allow you to do the thing you like without feeling judged socially or pressuring. It's also... Oh, go ahead.
I have to say, and I said this in another podcast, but it's a point I feel needs reiterating along the lines of makeup, and something that Trixie Mattel, world famous drag queen, said about it is that makeup allows you to become the you that you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to paint on the person that you mentally see yourself as, and that is not a gendered thing.
Mm-hmm. I still find it funny that I got one of my youth into makeup somewhat because we were talking and he was like, oh, these women out here, they're doing this and they're doing this and they look so good, but like that's not what they look like underneath. And I was like, okay, you do the same thing. And he goes, I could? I'm like, if you really wanted to. He goes, no, there's no. I was like, no. And I started pulling up YouTube and I was like, look, there's tutorials for men too. And he was like, oh shit, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I have a beard.
Yeah. There's even quote unquote makeup for men now for those guys who are a little,
insecure.
Yeah, exactly. So if you need to stay on your side of the aisle for comfort, there's something for you there now.
Guy liner, yeah. I went over that with one of my youth actually, and I was like, look, you can get the men from the men's makeup. However, it's like $2 to $3 more expensive. A lot of it isn't smudge proof. A lot of it doesn't have the same thing. Women have been running the makeup game for years, okay? Use their stuff. It's tested and sorted through. They know what works. Just...
Well, a little insider knowledge from watching a lot of Trixie's videos. Actually, a lot of the makeup industry is run by men.
Oh yeah, no, I know that, but it's geared towards typically women, and as such, it's like no, use women's products because there's a much wider variety. I think I did see like a guy's eyeliner one time, and I looked, it was terrible. I'm not going to name the brand. I don't want to get sued, but it was like, it just didn't flow right, and my partner who got it from me was like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would be like this." I was like, "Nah, it's fine. You tried your best." She's like, "I just wanted you to wear makeup for me." And I was like, "I'll just wear regular makeup for you." She's like, "You will?" And now I have a bag full of makeup and nail polish and lipstick because she just like a little nightingale. Just, "Oh hey, I got you this lipstick. I got you this nail polish. If you want to just throw it on."
She wants you to look good, and then I'm sure that when you're wearing it and you see yourself, you're like, "Oh goodness, I am amazing."
Yeah, I now own more makeup than that partner, so. And it's not by like a little bit; it's by an order of magnitude. I own like maybe 10 times more like lipstick and nail polish than she does. So.
And do you? Is this part of your persona when either working or, and we haven't mentioned this in the podcast yet, but you mentioned before it that you do a bit of gaming?
Yeah, it's, for me, it's something where it's just what I enjoy. I typically don't do it when working because unfortunately I work with many conservative parents where if you come in looking, basically it creates expectation. So after a while, I might be like, you know what, I'm just going to leave my whatever on and just hang out and do whatever. I typically don't wear. It mostly comes down to laziness if I wear makeup or not. I'm like, do I have time? Okay, will I take it off? I have woken up with my pillow looking like I smothered a clown because I just did not care and I just fell asleep. It's more so just that. It's a convenience and an enjoyment thing. I mostly do it when I'm going to actually conventions. I've been wearing more makeup and nail polish and such when I go to conventions. I typically help a friend run her table, and it's been convenient also because typically one of my friends will usually be like, "No, we're all going to take off our makeup together," and I'm like, "Oh, fine," and that's my motivation.
So what conventions are these?
There's a variety of them. The best one we've been to, typically they're, for lack of a better word, nerd culture conventions. We went to FlameCon recently. We went to Small Press Expo. We went to the best one that I loved the most was last year. We went to, well, not last year, 2019. To me, this year just seems like it's continuing. 2020 is still happening. We're still in it. Was BlurredCon, which was in Crystal City, Virginia. It was for focusing on Black Indigenous people of color, but it's for everybody. And I wore lipstick and nail polish various days throughout, and there was no question of it. It was just, oh, this is nice, and people just interacting, but it was focusing on anime, gaming, things of the sort, because those cultures typically are more accepting than a lot of the other mainstream cultures. However, I do have a friend who's like, "Hey, you know what? You want to come with me to a gun show?" And I'm like, "I don't think I would." He's like, "Honestly, there's more people than you think who are just like, whatever." And I'm like, "Oh, maybe I'll look into that sphere." Because I do like that kind of thing, but I'm just like, I don't need somebody named like Cletus or whatever yelling at me about how I should not be wearing something or things of the sort. I typically am very, what would the term be? Gender normative, or not normative. I typically conform to the historical expectation for dress and things of the sort. But if I'm going out and having fun, sometimes I'm just like, no, I just want to wear what I want to wear. If I want to wear this, frilly thing or flowers in my beard or whatever, let me live my life.
Well, a friend of mine, or an old friend of mine. I haven't seen him in many years, but he used to live in North Carolina, I think in the Charlotte area, yes. And he went to a gun range fully painted, and I can't remember if he said he was wearing a dress, but I think he said he was wearing women's clothing, which might just be like a blouse and like tight fitting pants. And he loved it because his boyfriend at the time was this big jock and wanted to take him out there. And people were like slightly poking fun at him, like, you can't, what are you doing here? You can't shoot. And he just picked up the gun and just like got like 10 in like the 10-point range. It's like, and that's how you do it. But a minute ago, you mentioned parents of the children that you work with. And I always forget that children have parents. I don't know why I forget. We all have parents. But I also know that parents can sometimes be the biggest pains in the neck. How do you manage that interaction after you've already been interacting with their child, and if they come and confront you about something?
Typically with that, it's a matter of getting them to understand where I'm coming from. I usually run things by the parents when it comes to certain subjects, things of the sort. I have a lot of parents who give me blanket permission, but even then I'll be like, hey, you know what, we're going to discuss this. We're going to talk about these things. And most are understanding. And the thing that I honestly love the most about foster parents is the vast majority of them want the best for the kids. I've had parents come to me and be like, you know what, I don't know what is needed to help this boy, but whatever is needed, just let me know. I'm down. I need to unlearn some stuff. I know that. And it's good to just talk with them as people. Some of them just need an outlet. I constantly tell my parents, hey, you know what? How about this? Okay? How about you and me talk, and we kind of sort through some of the stuff that you're going through? And they're like, well, I don't really have many people to talk to. And I'm like, you can have friends. You can have a life. Hey, how about this? When I take him out, don't worry about him. I'm going to take your kid, and I'm going to go somewhere. All right? You'll know that they're safe. You know that I will have them back at this time. You have my number. If we're going to be at the agency, you know where the agency is. You know for a fact this is going to happen. So you take that, 6, 7, 8 hours a week, and you do you time. And many parents are more accepting of that, so it helps soften things between them and the youth. The main thing with conflict is typically trying to understand where they're coming from, first and foremost, and then trying to help them see where I am and trying to meet in that middle ground. Or sometimes, unfortunately, worst case scenario, sometimes the youth might have to be moved, depending on the way that the person reacts, the way that the person treats the child. I hate that when that happens. I feel that permanency is one of the most important things for youth, but it's also something wherein I can't shy away from conflict just to make my job easier and put a youth at risk. Yeah.
I mean, totally. You never want... I mean, I was very lucky. I say lucky with an asterisk, but I definitely lived with my father, didn't live with my mother, so I had a male presence, interestingly enough. And then he remarried, and she left her job so that she could be a homemaker, which, if anyone ever tries to say that a homemaker is not a full-time job, I will fight you on that.
It definitely is. Oh my god, it most certainly is.
I loved having that regiment with my stepmom, and I would say that my stepmom had a better relationship than my father and I had, actually, because of that, even though she's not biological. And what I'm trying to get at is that feeling that a lot of like adopted kids, foster kids have, that sometimes the person who is taking care of you, who isn't your biological parent, is a bigger influence on you than that other person whose DNA you share.
Yeah, very much so. For me, chosen family is a big thing. It's something where I've chosen to have you in my life. We're close. There's a little girl that I call my niece, who is my friend's daughter, but I'm her uncle. She's my niece. We spend tons of time together. Well, when we can. Not so much during COVID, and it's something wherein those connections that you forge and make to me, kind of matter the most. There's the old saying, blood is thicker than water, but the actual saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. In choosing to be close to you, in choosing to form that relationship and that connection with you, we have chosen to be in each other's lives, and to me, that's something that's much more healthier than just being like, no, we're family, it's an obligation. Well, it's not an obligation. If I'm being completely honest, I don't get along with my father at all. I love the rest of my family. I adore his family. We get along great. My father and I are, at this point in time, it's irreconcilable. I don't even talk to him at this point in time. I see him when I see him, and it's hello, that's it. Every now and then he sends me like really long text messages about how God's going to kill me because I'm not a good son, and I'm just like, all right, cool, whatever. Bring it on. I believe in science. Hopefully, if he's going to try to strike me with thunder, I'm inside. But if not, it'll be an interesting story.
Also, if God's going to strike you with thunder, thunder is just sound, so... I mean,
sound can kill you.
I was about to say, there are studies where, like, sound... there's those new police sirens that they have that are meant to break up riots.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder when they could have used those in the past couple of weeks.
But
anyway,
it's the wrong people. Sorry.
But it was interesting when you said that saying, because I'm one of those people who has never heard the full version of that saying, but it reminds me of another one that I really love, just in the fact that it's the saying that people often misuse, is that jack of all trades, master of none, when the full line is jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one.
Yeah, it's there's a Reddit thread about that where I was just going through them the other day, and I was like, oh, these are fascinating. And I tell them to my kids, and they're like, what? What? That's not true.
Sometimes it's hard for people to... Sometimes it's hard for people to accept the truth. With that, but also, like, especially... And this is I'm tapping into the cultural thing here, but I'm actually thinking of a very specific instance, personal to me. But the disbelief of science that's coming out now, but has always been prevalent. And I can speak to this because in 6th grade, my teacher, who was a former university professor, she gave us the profound information that we are made of stars. Because we were going through physics and how matter is neither created nor destroyed, and how the light from the stars and the photons and everything is traveling to Earth, and it just gets caught here on Earth and stays here, and some of those bits of atoms gets put inside of us, so we are literally made of stars. And I was so excited, I went home and told my parents this, and they're like, that's not true. And I remember this so specifically, not just because of that feeling of being told I wasn't true, but it was the first time in my life where I truly believed something because of science, and my parents didn't believe something I had learned at school. And it was like the first crack in our relationship, which kind of continued to grow because of disbelief. And there are studies out there, which I'm sure you heard about or looked into, that show that as parents who are maybe not as educated as their children become more educated, it kind of does create a schism between them.
It does, or parents. Well, that's actually a good point, I guess, to slip into this point. For example, my father, my mother. My mother has told me to my face her whole existence for a while was just bent on me being better than her. My mother was like, you were going to be smarter than me, you were going to be more prepared than me. When I was a child, we'd go to the library, and my mother would pick out 5 books, and I could pick out 1. Or it was 4 and 1. She picked out more books than I did. After I read all the books she picked out for me, I got to read my book. And this was my entire childhood. Just constantly, are you reading? Are you reading? What are you reading? And my mother would go and she'd like skim through the books and give me these little tests. to see what the book was about. And it was never just an answer of like, oh, who was this person? Like, who was Miss Havisham? Oh, she's the person who does this. And she's like, no, you need to give me a better answer than that. So my mother molded my mind from a very young age because her belief was that children should be better than their parents. And my mom now has her master's degree, and she's always like, when are you going to get yours? When are you going to get yours? What are you doing? You should have a PhD. And I'm just like, we'll get around to that, Mom. I'm actually having dinner with her tonight, and we love debating and talking about things. And my mother will sometimes just go, huh, I didn't know that. I need to look into that. And then the next time I see her, she'll be like, did you know this and this and this? And it kind of keeps each other on our toes. Whereas with my father, it was a kind of jealousy growing up with where I'd say something and he'd be like, well, you don't really know that. You think you're so smart. You don't. And it was always him kind of putting me down. And I'll never forget there was one time where I came to him and I had my college diploma and I was so proud of it. My grandparents looked at it, he looked at it and he was like, this is something that I never had. But, I made a really good life without one. All I can think is like, this could have been a beautiful moment and you had to just make it about you. Great. Oh, that's fine. I'm just going to go about my business. And it's just only widened our schism over time. And I feel that parents or just people in your life who help you in that pursuit of knowledge or encourage it, or at least at a bare minimum, don't try to get in the way of it, are the ideal companionship that you should have in life. Those are the people that you need to connect with the most, The person who's going to be like, hey, there's this weird thing happening over there that I heard you like. You want to go? And it's like, yeah, I want to go. And they're like, all right, cool, I'll meet you there later. And those are the people that I love having in my life. And I feel that everybody benefits from that. And for a lot of the youth in my life, I try to be that person. I introduced a kid to sushi the other day. He hated it. But he liked One Piece. And that's all he's taken away from it. He's like, I hated everything. I liked the shrimp. I didn't like the rice with the shrimp. And I'm like, all right, cool. So he's like, if you can find me somewhere we can just eat the shrimp. And I'm like, I will look into that. And I feel that that's something that needs to be done more in society. Just that encouragement. And I try to do that.
I actually understand where he's coming from. I'm very anti-sushi, except I like eel. That's the only one that I will eat. All the others, I'm just...
I mean, eel is delicious and amazing, but my thing is, I also don't want to be that person who's like pressuring people about it. It's like, right, if this is what you like, this is what you like. However, you need to understand that, like,
you're just trying to get them into that mode of trying new things, which is how I learned that I liked eel, just by saying I've never had eel before. Let me give that a try. I went to Iceland last year for my birthday, right before the pandemic. So happy I was able to do that before all of this nonsense started. And I had whale and puffin. Because there's a particular type of whale that is actually very, they're not endangered by any means. I can't remember what type. It's actually kind of a smaller whale, and you get a lot of meat out of it. So they capture one like every 6 months, and that's it. And in Iceland, it's like, it's legal because it's something they've been doing for generations. And puffins, yes, they're cute, but they're birds. You eat chickens. I think chickens are cute. I still eat them. Anyway.
The secret ingredient is murder. Sorry.
Are you a vegan, vegetarian?
No, I'm not. I did it for a while, and then I went back. A lot of my family are vegan and vegetarian because of the religion that they're in. And my mom tried for a while because she's a Buddhist, and then she just kind of like backslid, and she's now like, okay, no red meat. I'll have chicken sparingly. So, but the joke that I make with that is always the fact that people don't seem to realize that you're killing an animal when you're eating them, and you need to accept that. I feel, because some people pretend like, oh,
yes. No, I've worked in hospitality, restaurants, hotels, what have you, for the more than 10 years in my life now. And I specifically remember working at the Standard Grill years ago, and our steaks at the time were halal. They eventually became not halal, and and now it's a seafood place. I don't know where their suppliers are. Anyway, the steaks were halal, and I was telling a table about this with kids, and the mother or father asked me, what does that mean? And I very frankly told them, oh, it's when you butcher the animal in such a way that you're not causing it distress. You're essentially slitting the throat from behind instead of putting a bullet into its brain, and it causes the muscles to not tense up. And as I'm telling this, the mother is just like getting wide-eyed and like looking at her children, and it's like, and what? Beef patties don't grow on trees, honey.
It's a common thing that I discuss with parents. Like, don't hide things from your children. It's one thing to make sure that it's age appropriate in the way that you tell them, but if you hide it from them, terrifyingly enough, they might go look it up themselves and find God knows what. So try to be that source of information. You know, I've had a kid be like, oh, well, what happens to you when you die? And I'm like, do you want the answer of like this, or do you want the answer of this? And he's like, I don't know. So I went to his mom and I was like, what are you comfortable? And she's like, tell him whatever. I don't want to have this conversation with him. So I sat him down and I explained to him, you know, things of this is the physical process. This is how it works. This is what some people believe happens. This is what some people believe happens. This is what science for a fact knows happens. The spirit, things like that are beyond our knowledge. If you want to believe that, that's up to you. I'm not trying to knock your belief. He took it and ran with it in the most weird way. Because he still believes. He's a believer. He believes in Jesus and all that. But the other day we were at the park, a playground actually, and he's like, oh, I want to play with this kid. And I was like, well, she's not wearing a mask, so if she gets too close, you know, what if you get sick? What if you get COVID? And he's like, well, if I get COVID, I get COVID. I was like, well, your family might, you know, get sick, or, you know, somebody might die. And he looks me dead in the eye and he goes, well, then they'll be with Jesus, and that's where they want to be anyway, right? So that's a win either way.
Hey, he's going to be a great lawyer someday.
But the fact that he just had that absolute certainty of, when you die, if you're a good person, you go to Jesus. That's a good thing. Boom. Death is no longer scary. It's just like, wait, what? Dude. And I didn't really have anything to say to that. I just kind of explained to him, well, some people don't want to meet him so soon. Because I don't want to create that fear of the unknown or like death in him when he has this apparently great attitude of just, oh, but I was like, no, let's not be careless. And I explained to him, you know, sickness and suffering, things like that. And he was like, okay, that makes sense. I don't want my mom to suffer. I'm like, all right, cool, great. We made progress.
So you said you said the religion death thing is a difficult question. Do you ever, do parents ever put onto you that they would rather have you discuss the birds and the bees?
Oh, all the time. I've had many parents, usually single mothers or single foster mothers, be like, hey, can you have this talk with my child? And I'm like, all right, how do you want me to have this? And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, do you want me to be like nitty gritty, nuts and bolts? Are you leaving it up to my discretion? Or are you? And they're like, yeah, no, I'm just leaving it up to your discretion. And yeah, I will sit down and have that talk with them, and I'll explain to them things. And I try to keep it very, very mindful of how a child's stage of development might affect how they proceed in life. So I keep it as something of, you know what? If you want to know these things, if I feel that it's age appropriate and you're old enough, I will say, you know, when a person likes another person and they feel a strong connection and they've agreed upon that connection and there's consent involved between the two people, they might proceed with, and I'll give them a very direct explanation of how coitus works, but keeping it as general as possible, the mannerism of, you know, penetration, things like that, etc. But without getting too specific, because I remember one of my kids was like, what about a boy and a boy? And I was like, did I mention any girl parts or boy parts? He's like, well, no. I was like, well, there you go. He's like, well, what if I like girls? And I was like, well, if you like girls, what would you like to know? And he was like, well, I want to know this. And I was like, and I went back to his mom and I was like, he's asking these questions, and she's like, he's like 14. I guess tell him. I was like, all right, cool. And we went down the explanation of things like pleasure and consent and the sexual interaction between people who are male presenting and female presenting and genitals and things of, you know, mutual pleasure. And then I went into the orgasm gap, which he was just like, but is that a thing? And I was like, yes. And we had a whole discussion about that. So for me, it's a conversation that's very grounded in both parental comfort and appropriateness of the youth. I find that lying to children about this kind of thing doesn't help. Hiding it from them doesn't help. it's much easier for me to give them basic information and work from there than it is for me to undo misgivings or information they found themselves. So I'd prefer that, yeah.
And, for example, if you have someone who is coming to you and is sexually active, how do you have discussions around emotionality and sexuality? Because stereotypically, men are thought to be, where it comes to sex, again, that sort of bee from flower to flower to flower, maybe a little bit, but they're never thought to be possessive in sexuality. Like, they can go around, but the woman is supposed to be possessive sexually and only supposed to have one man. Ugh. It gets really, really murky, but is it the same conversation again, where you're basically asking them or trying to break down the system for them? Or does it become something different because there's another layer involved?
It's a very similar conversation, except the first idea I promote is empathy. It's empathy, autonomy, consent. It's understanding that this other person has feelings, and I always stress that to my youth. If you're going to be sexually involved with someone, you need to understand that this is a whole person. They have feelings, they have emotions, they're not just some tool for your pleasure that you will move on from when you're done. But also, you need to remember, it is your body. If you don't want to do certain things, if you don't want to be involved in certain things, you don't have to be. The relationship is between you and this other person and what you two have consented and agreed to. I touch on aspects such as fidelity, things of the sort. I try not to let my own beliefs leach into it. I let my kids figure that out for themselves. Like, one of them was like, well, what if I want to have 2 girlfriends? And I was like, if both parties are aware of and consenting to that, then that's your choice. I very heavily stress. I work on the 2 points first, but then I spend the most time on consent and expressing to them what consent means, what consent looks like, that it is an enthusiastic yes, not the lack of a no. It's knowing the other person is in a proper mental space and well and healthy enough to proceed with things. It's explaining to them things like your friend saying, oh, well, this person's kind of stupid, so let's do this. It's not good, and it's not the boundaries of good consent. You are trying to take advantage, which is unfortunately something that I found gets very murky with young boys. The mindset of, oh, well, I've been told by this person this is okay, and it's undoing that. If something like, all right, just because that person says it's okay doesn't mean that it's okay. Just because your friend has said, oh yeah, like, just stick it in here or do this, people like that, you don't even need to ask. I'm like, no, ask. Believe me, ask. It's not. I was like, would you like it if I did that to you? Oh God, no. Why would you do that to me? I was like, then why would you do that to somebody else? And they're like, well, people say that's what they like. I'm like, no. Somebody likes what they tell you they like. It's a whole different thing to be exploring something with somebody consensually and you have understandings versus you just spring something on them, hoping that this random person somehow knows their body better than they do. And a lot of them have gotten that. Some of them kind of give me pushback. So
Can I take you to a gay bar post-pandemic and just have you give a lecture on this to the entire crowd? And I say this as a gay man, and I think I might have spoken about this on a previous podcast, or maybe it was in the group, but there, at least for my generation and the ones before me, I think luckily for newer generations, being able to come out earlier, and I hate the word normal, but I'm going to say normalizing homosexuality is working to their benefit. But for us, not being able to not being able to be out at an age when we were sexually developing, or being out like myself, but not having any outlet to really express other than saying I am this thing, it stymies our production, like a mental, emotional sort of production to a later state usually when we are finally able to openly be around others like ourselves. I believe it used to be the 30s. Essentially, your 20s were your 30s and your teens were your 20s for gay people. It's like a 10-year gap. And I still feel like there's a lot of that. I've been on... I use Scruff and I use Grindr, and I find that when I try to open up to conversations, it's extremes. It's either they immediately shut down because they don't want to have those conversations, and they just I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but they just immediately shut down, or they are very open about it because they have maybe done some self-exploration and matured a little bit, and they're willing to discuss with you the things that they are truly interested in. And then on top of that, we have another layer of where, as gay people, because we are already kind of sexualized by culture for being of a different sexuality, that let us bleed a little bit easier into even further. I'm going to use this word, and I like this word, but it does have sometimes a negative connotation. We are able to aberrate a little bit even further into certain kinks and fetishes. Those especially take so much conversation and time and understanding, and they can be a lot of fun. They can be so much fun, but you do have to have that, exactly as you said, empathy, autonomy, and consent. And not only that, you have to have another layer of learning, which I think kind of goes into the autonomy, but it goes into this layer of learning. Like, for example, like, or am I just going to stick this here? It's like, no, don't stick that there.
Yeah.
You have to understand sometimes how the body works. Sometimes you have to like go really deep into it, understand anatomy and things like that, and how you can do certain things that are going to ride that line between pleasure and pain. And it's a very fine line. Sometimes finer for certain people.
Yeah, it's something where I express a lot to youth. Take time, learn your partner's body, learn what you like, learn what they like. Take your time. It's fine. And I found that a lot of people, regardless of sexuality, there's a weird social stigma against talking too much. It's like, oh, don't talk too much, it ruins it. I'm like, excuse me? Yeah, no, if you just like do it, it's so much hotter. And I'm like, no. If you do it and it works, it's so much hotter. If you do it and it does not work, it is traumatic and terrible. And that's what you don't seem to get. And I have to express to somebody, hey, all right, so you're just gonna spit on it and jam it in, right? Would you like that? Well, no. Okay. Would your boy like that? Well, no. Would anybody you know who was a man like that? No. Then why would your partner like that? Well, oh, because you saw it in porn? Well, nah, I've heard from people. I'm like, people like what? Because there's also the social concept of people who are just trying to get out of the experience. Oh, did you like that? Yeah, I like that. I can go home now, right? All right, cool, bye. And then that guy never gets a call again, and he's like, what? It went so well. Things were going well. It's like, no, things weren't going well. Things went terribly. You hurt this person, and now they're traumatized and upset, and you didn't want to do that to that person, but you let yourself get ahead of yourself. With youth, when it comes to that kind of thing, I've had to, particularly with my LGBTQ youth, I've had to undo a lot of myths because a lot of them don't feel that they have enough information out there. Like one of my boys was like, well, I've been talking to guys online, and I was like, what do you mean by guys? Like, how old are these guys? What? He's like, no, I'm being safe. And I'm like, okay, but like, he's like, well, they say I have to do this, and it seems like it'll hurt. I'm like, all right, you don't have to do anything you don't want to at all.
No.
Period.
No, you don't have to be. Something that I see a lot happening is that because of a way in the LGBTQ community, the way a person presents themselves in a gender sort of way, like you have people who describe themselves or culture prescribes to them a more feminine look or more masculine look.
Mm-hmm.
And this works for men, women, and those in between. And because of that, they will say, oh, because this guy, for example, looks more feminine, he's a bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Not always true. You are perfectly okay being what we would call a top. You are perfectly okay not doing, and when I say top or bottom, I'm meaning with anal intercourse. You're perfectly okay not doing anal at all. If you just want to do blowjobs, that's fine. If you don't want to do blowjobs, if you just want to jerk off, that's fine. If you don't want to do that and you just want to make out and do BDSM, learn it, and then that's fine.
I've also had to express to my youth that something of sex doesn't make your sexuality. It's something that a lot of them have to unlearn. You know, hey, you can be asexual and gay. It's fine. You can be homoromantic and be in a loving relationship and be super happy with this dude and have never had sex with him. And they're like, well, but you know, I read online. I'm like, stop reading stuff online. Okay? You have to curate it to be able to understand it and to go through it. And it's something where also, unfortunately, with one of my youth, he had a big issue with a number of things where people were like, well, you can't be bi because of this. And I had to explain to him, look, it's your life, it's your body, you like who you like, and that's okay. Don't let other people prescribe to you how you should live because they have their own misgivings about it. Are they living your life? No.
And to him, I would say there's a huge stigma on both sides of the fence about bi erasure.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're saying you can't be this thing, and you can totally be this thing. It amazes me. Well, Lancelot, I really could keep up this conversation for a good long while more, but we are coming up on our hour. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Basically, when it comes to this, it's something wherein I feel that if you want to see what masculinity means to you, you have to explore it. You have to explore it, and you have to look at it not just from the place of comfort and privilege and pride. You have to also look at the darker parts of yourself. You have to analyze everything, and you have to learn to sit with that discomfort while you're working through it. But most of all, not make it other people's problem. I find it so hard, particularly for men in my life, to express and be connected and be open and be direct about what is going on inside, that they just kind of try to shut it up. And it's like, okay, yeah, you have it in a prison, but it's a prison made out of glass, and one day it's going to break out anyway, and who knows how angry it's going to be when it does. So you need to deal with those things, and you need to ask yourself, what does masculinity mean to me? What do I feel, not just today, but what did I feel before? What did I feel? Go back, analyze things, analyze past relationships, analyze your friendships, and realize that it's okay to be the person that you want to be, that's not hurting others, that's not being negative or degrading or insulting to others, that's putting good out into the world, or even just not creating evil. Whatever that looks like for you, and be happy with who you are, because honestly, you're the only person that's going to do that for you. I tell people all the time, don't try to form relationships. Don't tell yourself you're going to meet the right person who's going to fix or complete or finish something. Find that for yourself, because it's worth it. And ultimately, in the long run, that is the person who is going to always be there. Because yes, it's great to have people in your life, but to force them to be there for you because of the things that you can't deal with is unfair. And everyone should try to find that strength within themselves through therapy, self-reflection, mindfulness, to be a better person. And if that's how you identify, a better man or a better masculine presenting individual.
So well said. And you covered some things there that I meant to get to in our conversation but didn't. But I'm so glad you were able to say them now. Thank you again, Lancelot.
No problem, Preston. Anytime. Right.
Maybe
Thank you
in
very
a future
much.
season. Yes, we will bring you back. And I'll see you at a meeting soon.
See you at the next meeting. Bye.
Have a good day.
You too.
Another big thank you to Lancelot Brown. He gets a gold star for being one of my favorite guests ever on Masks of Masculinity. Feel free to say hi to Lancelot on Facebook and take the mantra of empathy, autonomy, and consent forward in your daily lives. Next time, we'll have a gentleman I first met while working on the play Rossum's Universal Robots, Kyle Rago. Until then, if you're man enough for you, you're man enough for us.